Hi everyone, I'm Hoang. I head up global field marketing at VIOOH and really pleased to be joined by a couple of really interesting guests today, speaking from different perspectives. So we have an established media agency in MENA, and then also a DSP who's fast becoming a major player in the digital out-of-home space. And again, we'll have a short Q&A at the end of this session, so please feel free to ask any questions you might have via Slido. So, Yasmine and Tomás, happy to have you with us today. If you could just give a quick introduction to who you are, what you do, and your company.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Yasmine. I work at WPP Media, and a big part of my role is looking after evolving channels and how channels like programmatic digital out-of-home evolve from just being a standalone part of our executions to being fully integrated into our overall strategies.
Amazing. Thank you, Yasmine. And do we have Tomás on the call?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Tomás. I work for Google as part of the DV360 business. So I'm working across our programmatic solution. I'm based out of our EMEA headquarters in Dublin. I'm 10 years at Google now, initially working on the UK market for 5 years, and I spent the last 5 years now largely working on the MENA region. Digital out-of-home is one of our key solutions, I'd say, and on programmatic. So I'm delighted to be here today to meet you all, to participate in the panel, obviously, and also just to listen and learn from the rest of the wonderful speakers we have on the event today.
Amazing, thank you, and really pleased to have you both with us today as well. So as you can see, the Middle East seems to be a fast-growing market. Among recent buyers of programmatic digital out-of-home, we see that 34% have included the channel in their recent campaigns of the past 18 months or so. So are you seeing that reflected in your current businesses? And happy for that to be an open floor. So whoever wants to go first, please go ahead.
Yeah, I can go. Yes, 34% is definitely a very strong signal that there is momentum. I would say that would be a bit different for MENA, given that I know that this is a MENA case study, but given the activations that we have in market versus international campaigns as well, like we've just seen with the Qatar Airways example. But there's definitely a growing interest, especially when you look at like the broader direction across the market. A lot of what we're seeing is, shifting towards digitizing traditional channels and moving into more data-led planning and holistic approaches and activations across. What's interesting for us is that a lot of our clients are already activating programmatic digital out-of-home. So yes, I would say that it does reflect in our business. But I would like to highlight that the majority of that would be on an international level, where things I think are a bit more mature. But locally, adoption is definitely growing. I would just say it's a little bit more gradual than what we're seeing on an international basis. But yeah, the interest is there from clients. There's still things like how the inventory is structured, how we buy inventory, and just overall how programmatic digital out-of-home is perceived versus traditional out-of-home. A lot of education that's being done. And this is where we need to clearly showcase programmatic digital out-of-home within wider strategies. It's not comparable to traditional, but it's not the same as what you have on other programmatic activations or other digital channels as well. So it is really finding its place within the strategy, how it complements, how it doesn't become more of a nice to have, or maybe if we have a test budget, but overall a crucial part of our overall strategies that we have. We've seen a lot more. I know Jim just mentioned as well that we've seen a lot more screens become available programmatically, which has been a great shift for us. And, the opportunity is definitely there and growing.
Great to hear that. Yeah, I think that's a really nice summary about how that channel is just becoming so popular in the Middle East and how it straddles both out of home, but also digital, but doesn't quite fit into both. So great summary. And Tomás, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I think we're definitely at an inflection point for digital out of home. Like over the last 18 months, advertisers in the region. So my lights got out here. There you go. Advertisers in the region, they're realizing that you don't have to sacrifice the impact of a traditional out-of-home to get the flexibility of data-driven and the agility of data-driven digital out-of-home through programmatic. It's not an all-or-nothing approach, and I think originally, certainly in my earlier conversations, there were hesitations around that, where, you know, do we have to move everything over? So what we're kind of seeing is people are doing pockets, but still, I think there's a lot of room to grow there. Like globally, digital out-of-home is a $32 billion market, and only 15% of that is transacted programmatically right now. And when you compare that to our other really emerging format programmatically would be connected TV, and 90% of that is adopted through programmatic channels. So that just gives you an idea of the sort of headroom and growth potential there is still in programmatic, on digital out-of-home. So what I'd say is we're not seeing an overnight shift, but rather a steady evolution. And I think the MENA region, is really well positioned to capitalize on that, given the widespread adoption of digital screens. Anyway, you see that the second you land in a lot of the airports, how much further on the region is in terms of screens. And I think we're definitely starting to see that uptick now in customers applying it on campaigns in DV360, whereas it would have been a bit slower in previous years.
Great. Thank you, Tomás. And I really liked your example there of CTV as well, because that's a one-to-many medium. So, programmatic digital out-of-home also operating in that same space, and that headroom that it has to grow, it really signals a strong indicator for the channel's growth. So we touched a little bit earlier on how customers and clients are coming to you and actually are adopting programmatic digital out-of-home. But what does that look like on your end? Like, are they coming to you and asking to include the channel in their briefs, or are you kind of suggesting that to them? And Yasmine, I'll come to you first on that one.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I would say it's definitely a mix. And we're still very much in the education side of it. So even if they are asking about it, it's very like, okay, I want to know more. I want to understand it better. But then we still get asked a lot of the same kind of questions of what you would get asked for a traditional out-of-home activation. So there is a lot of education happening. But funny enough, I would say, a couple of years ago, there was actually a much stronger curiosity from clients. They really wanted to understand, like, the channel, how do we push this forward? But at that time, especially locally, I think media owners were still a lot more cautious, although some of them had already picked it up. But, they were a lot more cautious locally around how programmatic would fit within their existing models and if that would change, But today that's shifted. Supply has definitely grown. So it has become more about not just, what is programmatic digital out-of-home, but how do I understand how to incorporate it within my overall strategy today? And that's where the education is happening. So it's not really about awareness. It's more about just integration and really utilizing the capabilities that programmatic digital out-of-home can bring. Because clients don't want another siloed channel. There's already so much of that. And ultimately, they want to understand how does it actually work alongside other channels, their social, their video, the CTV, and how does it contribute to all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And we have a question later on where we touch on that stat around multi-channel planning as well. So it'd be great to delve into that a little bit later on. And Tomás, do you have anything to add about that as well? Are clients coming to you with programmatic digital out-of-home in the brief, or are you suggesting it as a channel?
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear the different point of views that Yasmine's and it seems like there's so much correlation in the challenges and the views in the industry. So it's so interesting to hear. I'd say it's a bit of a hybrid now at the moment. So some brands and some agencies are factoring it in during the brief because they're looking for that kind of omni-channel strategy. However, we still spend, I'd say, probably the majority of our time positioning it as part of a wider proposal. So typically buyers are they're thinking in silos, just as Yasmine said. So there'll be like an out-of-home budget, and then there'll be like a programmatic budget. So our job is to try and bridge that gap and show them that programmatic digital out-of-home isn't just about putting a banner on a street corner. It's about having contextual relevance, flexibility, pausing campaigns and using environmental triggers, for example. So it's our job to kind of land that education piece to make it differentiated as a solution. And also just from an operational standpoint as well, trying to show how programmatic solves for the fragmented buying side of things, where previously would be resource intensive to be running all these things in silos. That by having them in one place, it's more efficient for their business.
Amazing, thank you. And that actually leads us on very nicely to the next question, which is about curated marketplaces. And as Adam mentioned in the key findings, that fragmented marketplace is something that is a challenge as programmatic digital out-of-home begins to scale. So we included this question as a new topic for the State of the Nation research this year. So it's great that we have this for the Middle East because it's the first time that we've asked this question and we already have this data. So we see that 58 of Middle East respondents are definitely or somewhat likely to use curated marketplaces in the future. And that's particularly strong in the UAE with 60% of those respondents saying that they would use that. So Yasmine, is curation currently on your radar for programmatic digital out of home? And what kinds of challenges do you think it would resolve for your clients?
It is definitely on our radar. I would say it has been for a while. But I do want to be a little bit realistic, although, yes, it would solve a lot of challenges and it would simplify a lot of how we're currently doing things today in terms of planning and activation, optimizing. But we're not fully there yet in MENA currently. So if we look at this at an international scale, at a global level where markets are a lot more mature, yes, we would jump on the bandwagon to be able to curate across these different markets. And it completely makes sense. We have the data, the inventory scale is there. There is, and not that it's not available here. It's just about the way that the ecosystem is here. I think we need to strengthen, some of the fundamentals first, especially around how inventory is currently structured, how we're buying it. A lot of the supply is still currently on guaranteed deals, and it becomes a question of then how do we actually leverage some of the benefits across, like the data-led, it needs to be more data-led versus inventory-led. That's the biggest thing that we need to adopt. Definitely there is a movement. We see the interest. But I do think that there is still a little bit of, the fundamentals that need to be done beforehand so that we can do it right.
Sure, that's great. And, it's the foundations of the building blocks that need to be laid before that. So, yeah, totally understand. And thank you for giving a realistic view as well. And Tomás, thinking about your role at DV360, in particular, that travel space that you work in, can you see a future where a curated marketplace might be beneficial? And would your clients be interested in an audience buy?
Yeah, just listening to what Yasmine said there as well. I think that's really touching on the crux of it as well. It comes down to scale, right, and solving for that. And if we're able to solve for that scale challenge, I think there's 100% there's huge opportunity there, particularly in the travel space, because context and audience movements, they're really, really important in that industry. So a created marketplace will be really valuable, I think, because, it would allow us to kind of group inventory logically. So, for example, building screens at airport, like bundling screens at airports, transit hubs, luxury shopping districts into one executable package. I think that's really enticing and really appealing. Instead of travel clients kind of largely is buying specific billboards for launches, an audience-led approach would allow them to really follow the consumer on their journey, from landing in an airport, for example, to transitioning around the city. So it's absolutely, that'll be very attractive, I think. It's just a matter of making sure that the scale is there in the different markets to be able to execute it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Really, really interesting. So just moving over to programmatic digital out-of-home as part of a multi-channel strategy, we see that programmatic digital out-of-home is embedded in multi-channel planning, with a huge percentage of Middle East marketers planning it as part of wider digital or programmatic activity. That's opposed to planning it as standalone or out-of-home activity. So that's great. And we're also seeing that separately, 60% rate the ability to measure performance across multiple digital channels as important. So, Tomás, I'm going to come to you for the next question. What does DV360's setup look like to execute on that multi-channel planning approach? And when a client asks for unified reporting today, what can you deliver and what are you still working around?
Cool. So what I'd say is the biggest advantage of buying digital out-of-home through DV360 at the moment is consolidation. So, today we can deliver unified campaign management. So a customer or agency can sit in the one UI and manage digital out-of-home alongside display, video, connected TV, audio, all their channels in one place. So they're getting a single view of the budget, delivery metrics, and consolidated billing is really key in that as well, I would say. And I can think of an example, from last year, just as a quick example, where a one-person team, because of resource constraints, was able to manage the marketing for one of the region's most recognizable brands during a period of transition. And I think that's quite incredible when you think about it, how streamlined the process is now, that just one person can manage something of that magnitude when resources are limited. And in terms of what we're working on for the future on the measurement side of things, measurement transparency is super important. So a one-to-many environment, it's an industry-wide focus, I think, and we've got recently released our new roadmap, and we're working on open RTB 2.6 support for out-of-home. So the idea is to have much deeper insights. So the value of the reporting will be stronger in the system, and will be aligned then as well with the IAB standards.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly impressive. The example that you gave about, one team member being able to manage a campaign like that. And I think that's only going to grow. Those advancements will definitely push the channel ahead. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that transpires. And Yasmine, could you provide some insights into how programmatic digital out-of-home currently fits in your clients' media plans? And what does that measurement story look like for your clients in practice?
Yeah, for us, programmatic digital out-of-home is, and like any other channel, is measured as part of the wider ecosystem. So again, we don't, we're trying to avoid any type of isolations, but of course, that is part of it. A good example is a campaign where we ran with Huawei last year. It was in partnership with JCDecaux and VIOOH and DV360 actually. So we were where we use real-time location data to target inbound travelers. So when people were coming in from specific destinations, only at those times when those flights were arriving in real time were the ads being served. But it wasn't just about reaching them on an outdoor screen. It was more about what happened next. How do we reconnect with them? How do we re-engage with them across the other channels that that the user would be connected with? So that's where we saw a very clear uplift across other digital channels. This was our first activation, including programmatic digital out-of-home. And we saw, how that actually impacted the other channels that we had today. But beyond that, measurement, and, we've heard it just now from Tomás and even Leon earlier, there's quite a few layers and there's still a lot of development that we do need to go through. It's definitely moved ahead quite a bit, but today looking at more like audience and movements across like footfall, proximity, cross-channel impact, such as uplifts, search and site visits, brand lift studies. That is all there. But of course, there's, some limitations with it being such a one-to-many, and that is the beauty of it as well. And so, it is important to note that it is a one-to-many channel. It's not an attribution that you can determine like you would, mobile or other digital activations. But there has been a major move in measurement across the industry, really. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that measurement story is something that really rings true across not only this market, but all the other global markets as well. It's continually reflected in one of the education areas for State of the Nation when we survey about programmatic digital out-of-home, but really great call out about how, it's not measured the same. And in some ways, it's about, setting those new boundaries, and that's up to us as an industry to create. So thank you. Staying on that multi-channel theme, so you mentioned the Huawei campaign. Was social media part of that? Because obviously we see that social media is coming out on top as the channel most likely to be planned alongside programmatic digital out-of-home at the moment, both performance and brand-led. Why do you think that is? And could you shed any light on like any nuances in the Middle East that might explain why there's such a high preference for social media or mobile?
I mean, it is an interesting one because we're a very social first market, I'd say. But yes, we did have social media along with display and some video across for the Huawei one. The reason social does really stand out is because, I mean, in my opinion, it naturally complements what programmatic digital out of home, can't do. Programmatic digital out of home is really great for high impact, contextual awareness, the flexibility, reaching people in the real world at scale, key moments. But, when it comes to it's still a one-to-many channel. So social, on the other hand, gives you really precision targeting. You can control your interaction with those audiences. So I think it's, about balancing the two. And when it comes to combining them, I mean, you're essentially, connecting physical world exposure and then, connecting that with what people do on a one-to-one basis on their mobile in their, free space and their free time. And that's where real value comes in. And in MENA, going back to your question about why maybe social is the highest, I mean, like I said at the very beginning, we are very mobile and, our social usage is quite high compared to other markets. So, I mean, given those nuances, it does make sense that, that it would be so high having social as the complementary channel. But the connection does become very powerful when you put the two together.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think that's a very interesting interplay as well, because I think social media as a channel is very international. You can, watch content from someone around the world, but then programmatic digital out of home is very local. So it's interesting, the interplay that you've picked up on around, the two channels working together and what one can do versus the other. So thank you so much. And now, Tomás, moving on to a bit more of a technical question. So we're seeing a high preference for programmatic guaranteed or PG deals in the Middle East, but also a strong 52% for non-guaranteed as well. So from your perspective, are you seeing a specific preference for either deal type, or what are the scenarios in which one might be preferred over the other?
Yeah, it's something that comes up all of the time. I'd say it's kind of a conversation in any of the digital out of home activations. What I'd say is, like, we see strategic value in both, and preference really depends on what's the overall objective for the campaign. So buyers would prefer PG when they need certainty. If a travel brand, for example, is doing like a massive, global launch on a specific date, and they want to guarantee that they'll secure premium screens, it's very like the traditional model then of buying out of home, and they like, they favor that. They like the idea of running it through PG because it guarantees it. Also, like if for PG, it can take the heavy lifting out of things. There's a comfort in knowing that the majority of that activation is being handled, if you were doing it through VIOOH, for example, through the VIOOH team, and the actual execution side of it isn't managed by the buy team. There's a comfort in that. So sometimes for resourcing reasons, a buyer might prefer that. But I think non-guaranteed is really where a lot of the magic can happen. A lot of the additional extras that you can get and the benefits from programmatic really shine. So they're the right approach for thinking tactically and having flexibility. So, for example, a travel brand might want to bid on screens near an airport if flights are delayed, or an airline might trigger specific creative based on the current weather. If it's raining in London, maybe you'll do a launch that way. And also, when events happen and situations happen, having that flexibility to very rapidly be able to dial up or down or even turn off campaigns is something that non-guaranteed deal type really adds value.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Really, really insightful. So we've come to the last question of the session before we move on to the Q&A. So what are the top 3 things the region needs to do to increase spend in programmatic digital at home, do you think? And I'll leave that as an open floor. So whoever wants to go first.
I mean, just on the note that Tomás just said, I think, really understanding the different type of buying models and, having, or I guess, making sure that you want to unlock the full value. So when is it that you want to go with a guaranteed buy? What are the different type of buys and what is the value of each one? Which really goes into more of like the education piece around the two. And then, I mean, from my perspective, I feel like we've said it so much, but yeah, a better integration into planning. Like, yes, that's being done today, but where again, and how do you actually fit programmatic digital out of home when there is already outdoor potentially, when there's social, when there's other digital channels? What role does it really play? And making sure that different teams come together, because essentially a lot of that plan is done, or those plans are done by separate teams. And this is what we've seen massively change within the last few months, is there are, traditionally offline people and online people, social people, all coming together to work on this on a holistic basis. Yeah, I don't know how many I just said now, but
thank you. No, I think that was
key takeaways.
No, that was fantastic. Sorry, just to pick up on that, you said the last few months. Do you think that there's anything specific around the last few months that have brought that holistic planning together in particular, or do you think it's just the industry advancing at the level that it is?
Yeah, no, I guess, I mean, it is, one of the, not now, I mean, it's been a while now, but it is, if you look at the agencies, from an agency's perspective, outdoor teams were very separate, very segregated, I guess, from what digital did. There was the offline people, the online people, and you don't have that anymore. You really have the same across, and that really integral approach within the agency. So it's definitely a good time. But yeah, I think it's just the overall progression within the industry, within the channel itself. And what makes sense, this is what we're always client first. So this is what makes sense.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Tomás, top 3 things from you.
Yeah, it's amazing actually to hear how closely aligned the various speakers we all have been, in terms of the things I'm going to call it now, have been mentioned already, but it shows that it's quite agreed upon, So for me, it's we need to break down the planning cycle a little bit more. So rather than having traditional at-home planning teams and programmatic teams, working separately, making sure that they're collaborating closer. That's been done, depending on the business, depending on the agency, but there's definitely room for more adoption of that, to have budgets be fluid, to truly embrace that type of omni-channel planning. So I'd say that, getting closer on planning. Leon kind of touched on this earlier in his piece. Enabling dynamic creative. So, I think still a lot of brands are treating programmatic digital out of home a little like static print. Look, it still looks great. They're highly visual screens, but I think leveraging more data signals, leveraging more signals, and things like time of day, weather, live sports, whatever the signals that are most pertinent to your business are, to serve contextually relevant and dynamic ads. I think that's going to, we should be doing that on more scale. I think that's really what's going to capture consumer attention and, differentiate the format significantly. And then finally, I think maybe thinking tactically, educating advertisers on the role digital out of home can play in storytelling. So just to make sure that digital out of home is getting onto a wider media approach more frequently, rather than making, at the moment it probably makes its way onto the biggest executions, the largest brand pieces. But I think by educating advertisers more on how the role it can play in storytelling, digital out of home can find its way onto more of those always on campaigns, or more of those campaigns that are maybe smaller budgeted, and they might be getting more consideration for those. And I think, events like this probably really help connect the dots there as well.
Love that. Thank you. So we have breaking down the silos, we have dynamic creative and contextually relevant campaigns, and we have storytelling, which is lovely. So thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly go to the Q&A now. I can see that a few questions have come in. Let's see. We have, what's the future for Google/DV360 when it comes to digital out of home? Will it become one of the central channels that you focus on, Tomás?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think I mentioned earlier on, we've just done a roadmap for the rest of the year, and there's considerable emphasis on digital out of home now. So largely it's been focused around revamping the measurement side of things and adding more measurement solutions. I think we had probably a bit of catch up to do, so this is great that there's continued focus on it now. So it's one of our key formats that we're building out for the year, alongside connected TV being the other big priority for the business. We've actually just launched our latest narrative as well on digital out of home, which includes all of the things that we're working on and what's coming up for the year. So I'd be more than happy as well to send that around to anyone that is interested afterwards. If I could send it on to the VIOOH team to pass on if anyone's interested.
Thank you so much. Sounds great. One for you, Yasmine. How often are WPP clients using programmatic digital out of home versus traditional?
I wouldn't have the number top of mind, but we wouldn't, again, necessarily compare. Traditional will always be there. That's not something we ever want to take away. I still see them as very, very different. Although, yes, they're all, on outdoor screens. We don't want to take away from what traditional out of home brings to the table with complementing programmatic digital out of home and overall digital strategies into the strategy or into our plans. So I wouldn't have, definitely traditional is still dominating. There's no question about that. I don't know what the percentage or the split would be necessarily, but traditional out of home will always remain. And I think that's, why there's been a lot of misunderstanding, or maybe, I guess education that needs to be done as well, is because we're still comparing it to traditional. And I know it's obviously very easy to do so. Me, myself, when I first got into it, is understanding how programmatic digital out of home does align. Where does traditional make sense? Where do we need to actually really push for programmatic? Because there's so many capabilities that bring value. And a lot of times most of the time, we still have both on the plan. There is still traditional out of home, even if we have programmatic included. So I don't have the exact split. But yeah, of course, traditional is still a big part of our overall strategies.
Great, thank you. And I think that that's a really important part as well. It's complementing traditional out of home, and it goes back to the education piece about what does programmatic bring to the campaign specifically as well. So thank you for that. Final question. And I think this is for both of you. What industries are the top spenders in programmatic digital out of home at the moment? And on the flip side, which industries do you think are missing out on the channel?
Travel for sure is the biggest. Any international brand as well. So yeah, we have several across, but of course, travel would be one of the biggest that I'd say. I don't know if Tomás, you see the same from your end. Yeah, I'd assume so. And then we also have events as well. A lot of events happening and then type of clients. Some that are missing out. Honestly, it's applicable to all industries. So it depends on how you want to leverage it. But any type of data-led approach is relevant to any category across any client. And being able to reconnect with users over and over throughout their journey, throughout the consumer interaction with the brand, and being able to measure it. So I wouldn't say that it's, specific categories or verticals are missing out. I do genuinely believe it should be part of most and across all.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with Yasmine. Definitely, I would say travel, travel and tourism is the main one, and that's where we kind of see the majority of interest and investment. I think maybe that. It stands to reason a bit around airport positioning, for example, so it's logical there. But yeah, we would see most of it in travel. I think it's CPG as well. We've seen a bit more of a pickup there. In terms of areas where like it's a hard question to answer in a way, because it's obviously it's exposure that we would have in our business to these verticals. You know, the size of customers that I work on, there, you know, within these verticals there'd be lots of other customers that I don't necessarily touch across who could be doing more. But I definitely think there's probably opportunity in retail, for example, a bit more in retail. There's obviously a lot of solutions there, and we haven't necessarily seen the same take up. Retail tends to be quite performance focused, you know, which is maybe that, you know, that one when we're talking about the one-to-one measurement, one-to-many. So for that reason, it's probably a bit slower when it comes to on the adoption side of things. But I definitely think there's huge opportunity there as well.
Great, thank you so much, and we'll wrap it up there. I think that the particular takeaway is that programmatic digital out of home can be, you know, useful in all industries and any kind of brand looking to really enhance their campaign. So thank you both so much for joining me today. Really enjoyed the conversation. So I'll now pass on to Gavin for the final session of the day.